In the ancient days when the patriarch Jacob sojourned across the lands of Mesopotamia and Canaan, a boy was born whose name would echo through generations, not for the wealth of his inheritance, but for the fire that burned within his lineage. Levi was the third son of Jacob and Leah, born in a time when his mother's heart longed for affection. Leah, who had already borne Reuben and Simeon, looked upon this child and said, "Now this time my husband will be joined to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." And so his name was called Levi, meaning joined. Genesis 29-34. His birth came during a season of rivalry, for Jacob's household was divided by love and jealousy. Leah and Rachel contended for the patriarch's favor, and in that tension, Levi grew amid whispers of rejection and the silent ache of his mother's struggle. Yet from the seed of her sorrow came a son whose destiny would bind his family to the worship of God. Though he would not know it in his youth, Levi's name would one day symbolize not just the longing of a mother, but the joining of an entire nation to its creator. Levi and his brother Simeon were close in heart and temper. Both were fiery, zealous, and fiercely loyal to their family's honor. The first glimpse of Levi's character emerges from a moment of vengeance that would stain his hands and shape his destiny forever. When their sister Dinah was defiled by Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, Levi's heart ignited with fury. Though Shechem sought to make amends, offering to marry Dinah and unite their peoples, Jacob's sons plotted a deception. They said, "We cannot give our sister to a man who is uncircumcised." Shechem and his men agreed to the covenant of circumcision, but on the 3rd day, when they were in pain, Simeon and Levi took their swords and entered the city boldly, slaying every male. Genesis 34:25-26. It was a moment of raw justice, a defense of their sister's honor, yet also an act of uncontrolled wrath. The city fell in silence, its men struck down, its treasures taken. When Jacob heard of what his sons had done, his heart was filled with dread. He cried, "You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites. We are few in number, and they will unite against me and destroy me." Genesis 34:30. But Levi did not repent. To him, it was justice. To Jacob, it was violence unchecked. And so began the paradox of Levi's legacy. A man of zeal, capable of holy passion, yet shadowed by fury. Years passed. The family grew. The famine drove them into Egypt, where Joseph, the brother once sold into slavery, rose as a ruler under Pharaoh. Levi and his brothers bowed before him, not knowing at first the brother they betrayed. In time, reconciliation came, and Jacob's sons, once scattered by jealousy, were gathered under Joseph's protection. Levi watched his father's hair turn gray, and when Jacob blessed his sons before death, each received words that reflected their nature and destiny. When Levi's turn came, Jacob's words were heavy. "Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel." Genesis 49:5-7. It was both judgment and prophecy. Levi, who longed for his father's approval, received a fate that seemed bitter, to be scattered. Yet within those words lay the seed of redemption. For though Levi would indeed be scattered, his descendants would one day be scattered in holiness, not as outcasts but as ministers of God throughout Israel. Levi died in Egypt, as did his brothers, before the story of the Exodus began. But his name lived on through his sons, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, Exodus 6:16. These families would become the foundation of a tribe that would carry both the memory of their ancestor as zeal and the promise of divine service. Generations later, when a new Pharaoh rose who did not know Joseph, the children of Israel groaned under bondage. From among the descendants of Levi, a child was born who would deliver them, a baby hidden in a basket of reeds placed upon the Nile and rescued by the daughter of Pharaoh. His name was Moses, a son of Amram and Jochebed, both Levites. Exodus 2, 1-10. In him, the fierce passion of Levi would awaken once more, but now tempered by divine purpose. Moses grew in Pharaoh's court but could not ignore the suffering of his people. One day, seeing an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, he struck the man and hid his body in the sand. The fire of Levi's blood burned again, a zeal for justice unbridled, yet even this act drove Moses into exile, into the wilderness of Midian, where the Lord would meet him in flame and commission him to free his people. From that moment, the destiny of Levi's tribe began to turn. The curse of scattering was transforming into a calling. What had once been wrath would become worship. What had once been violence would be consecrated into service. As Moses stood before Pharaoh demanding freedom, and as Aaron, his brother and fellow Levite, became his voice, the tribe of Levi began to emerge as the spiritual core of the nation that was yet to be born. In the fires of Egypt's oppression, the Levites were being refined for their holy purpose. And when the Red Sea parted, when the Israelites walked upon dry ground and saw Pharaoh's army swallowed by the waves, the descendants of Levi sang among the multitudes, the tribe once cursed, now standing at the dawn of redemption. But their true consecration was still to come. In the wilderness, amid the echo of miracles and murmurs of complaint, the children of Israel began their long journey from slavery to nationhood. The tribe of Levi marched among them, not yet distinct in calling, not yet set apart, but carrying the legacy of their ancestors' zeal. They had seen the plagues of Egypt, the rod that became a serpent, the sea that divided, and the pillar of cloud that guided by day. Yet though they were free, their hearts were still learning what it meant to serve a holy God. At Mount Sinai, the mountain trembled with thunder and lightning. Smoke billowed upward as if the mountain itself burned. There the Lord descended in fire and gave his law to Moses, commandments written not on papyrus but upon stone, bound forever to his covenant people. The Levites stood among the tribes as the words of the covenant were spoken. You shall have no other gods before me. But soon after, when Moses lingered on the mountain, the people grew restless. They cried to Aaron, "Make us gods who will go before us." And Aaron, fearing the crowd, took their gold and fashioned a calf, a glittering idol of rebellion. Exodus 32, 1-4. When Moses descended from Sinai and saw the people dancing around the golden calf, his heart broke. The covenant had been shattered almost as soon as it was made. He cast the tablets from his hands, breaking them upon the rocks, and burned the calf in the fire. Then, standing at the entrance of the camp, he cried out with a voice that pierced through chaos, "Who is on the Lord's side? Come to me." Exodus 32:26. From every corner of the camp men hesitated, but one tribe moved. The sons of Levi stepped forward. They came not in fear, but in conviction. The same zeal that once drove their father Levi to vengeance now called them to divine allegiance. Moses commanded, "Each man put his sword on his side, and go back and forth from gate to gate throughout the camp, and each one kill his brother, his companion, and his neighbor." And the Levites obeyed. That day about 3,000 fell, but the covenant was restored. Exodus 32:28. It was a grim moment, a cleansing by the sword, but in that obedience Levi's descendants were transformed. What once had been a curse of wrath now became zeal for holiness. And Moses said to them, "Today you have been ordained for the service of the Lord, for you were against your own sons and brothers, and he has blessed you this day." Exodus 32:29. Thus the tribe of Levi was set apart, chosen not for land or inheritance but for service. The prophecy of Jacob was fulfilled, yet redeemed. They would indeed be scattered, but not as wanderers. They would dwell in every corner of Israel as ministers of the sanctuary, teachers of the law, guardians of sacred fire. From that moment onward, the Levites were no longer merely one tribe among 12. They were consecrated as the tribe of the sanctuary, devoted to the care of the tabernacle, the priesthood, and the presence of God among his people. The Lord said through Moses, "Behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel instead of every firstborn that opens the womb. Therefore the Levites shall be mine." Numbers 3:12. Aaron, the brother of Moses, became the first high priest, and his sons were appointed to offer sacrifices before the Lord. The rest of the Levites, the families of Gershon, Kohath, and Merari, were given specific duties. Some carried the curtains and coverings of the tabernacle, others the sacred furnishings, and others the structure itself. None were idle, and none bore arms in war. Their battle was spiritual, their inheritance divine. Their dwelling was the camp nearest the tabernacle. They encircled it like a living wall, shielding it from defilement. When the cloud of glory moved, the Levites took up the sacred objects. When the camp rested, they erected the dwelling of God. Every movement, every task was an act of reverence. Through wilderness years of hunger, rebellion, and divine discipline, the Levites remained steadfast. While others murmured for Egypt's comforts, they tended to the ark, the lamps, the incense, and the sacrifices. Their service bound them not to land or riches, but to holiness, and in that devotion, they found honor. As the Israelites neared the promised land, the role of Levi's descendants deepened. The tribe's organization was detailed in the law of Moses, for the Levites were to live not as warriors or farmers, but as stewards of sacred trust. Their charge was not to possess a territory, for God himself was their portion. You shall have no inheritance in their land, neither shall you have any portion among them. I am your portion and your inheritance among the children of Israel. Numbers 18:20. In this, they differed from all others. The 12 tribes would each receive borders and boundaries, but Levi's inheritance was invisible, found in the service of the altar and the teaching of the law. The tribe was divided into clans. The sons of Gershon tended the fabrics and hangings of the sanctuary. The sons of Kohath carried the ark, the table, and the holy vessels. The sons of Merari bore the frames, bars, and pillars. Their lives were marked by discipline, reverence, and sacrifice. When the people sinned in the wilderness and the earth swallowed the rebellious, the Levites stood firm. During the rebellion of Korah, himself a Levite who sought to usurp the priesthood, the ground split open, consuming the rebels alive. Numbers 16. From that judgment emerged a warning that even among the chosen, only obedience preserved honor. Aaron's rod, which budded miraculously overnight, was a divine sign that the priesthood belonged to the house of Levi by decree, not ambition. Numbers 17:8-10. This event sealed their sacred status, proving that God himself had chosen them to stand between him and his people. When Moses died and Joshua led Israel into Canaan, the Levites received not territory but cities, 48 in total, scattered among the tribes. Joshua 21:1-42. In every region, they lived as teachers, judges, and keepers of the law. Their scattering became their strength, for their presence infused every part of the nation with the remembrance of holiness. Throughout the years of conquest and settlement, the Levites preserved the knowledge of God. When the tabernacle stood at Shiloh, they guarded it. When the people forgot the law, they recited it. Their inheritance was a perpetual covenant of service, binding them to worship through all generations. But even this sacred tribe was not without testing. When Israel turned again to idols, the Levites often found themselves standing between the people and divine wrath. Some, like Eli's sons in later generations, would grow corrupt, desecrating their office for gain. Yet others, like Samuel, a child of the tribe raised in the temple, would restore honor through obedience and prophecy. The story of Levi was ever a balance between zeal and purity, between the sacred and the profane. Centuries passed. Kings rose and fell. The Ark of the Covenant, once carried through wilderness and war, found a resting place in the city of David. Under Solomon, the Levites reached their zenith. The temple stood upon Mount Moriah, a structure of gold and stone where the descendants of Levi performed their duties with solemn splendor. The priests, born of Aaron's line, offered sacrifices morning and evening. The Levites sang psalms, played cymbals and harps, and kept the rhythm of worship alive in Israel's heart. Their service was not mere ritual, it was memory. Each offering, each note of song, reminded the nation of the covenant that bound them to God. The psalms themselves often sprang from the pens of Levitical singers, Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun, whose words would echo through eternity. Yet prosperity brought complacency. When the nation turned to idols under wicked kings, the Levites' influence waned. The temple was neglected, its gates closed, its lamps extinguished. In the days of Ahaz, idolatry filled the streets, and the priests stood silent. But revival came again through King Hezekiah, who reopened the temple and summoned the Levites to purify it. "My sons," he said, "be not negligent now, for the Lord has chosen you to stand before him, to minister to him." 2 Chronicles 29:11. And they rose. With songs and sacrifices they cleansed the temple, restoring the sacred rhythm of Israel's worship. The sound of cymbals and trumpets once again filled Jerusalem, echoing Levi's ancient calling. Through generations of reform and ruin, the Levites remained the keepers of spiritual memory. Even when Babylon's armies descended, burning the temple and carrying the people into exile, the Levites preserved their lineage. By the rivers of Babylon they hung their harps upon the willows, yet their hearts did not forget Zion. Their identity was not bound to land or temple but to covenant, and covenant could not be conquered. When the exiles returned under Zerubbabel and Ezra, it was the Levites who rebuilt the altar and led the people in confession and song. Ezra himself was a priest and scribe of the tribe of Levi, and through him the law of Moses was restored to a scattered people. They read from the book of the law of God, making it clear and giving the meaning so that the people could understand. Nehemiah 8:8. In that moment, the prophecy of Jacob, that Levi would be scattered, reached its ultimate redemption. For they were scattered indeed, but as beacons of truth across every city and generation. As centuries turned and kingdoms faded, the descendants of Levi continued their sacred duty. Their bloodline flowed through prophets and teachers, through those who tended the temple in Jerusalem, and those who taught the law in synagogues scattered across the earth. Though empires changed, from Babylon to Persia, from Greece to Rome, the Levites remained the living bridge between Israel and her God. In time, the temple once more stood in glory under Herod's reign. The priests of Levi ministered daily, offering sacrifices upon the altar. Among them served men whose lineage reached back to Aaron, men like Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, who offered incense before the Lord, Luke 1:8-9. Even in the days when prophets were few, the Levites kept the lamp of worship burning. Their legacy culminated not in power but in service. For from their ancient calling, from Levi as zeal and Moses obedience, came the enduring symbol of mediation, a people who stood between heaven and earth, bearing the weight of both. Their story, from violence to sanctity, mirrors the journey of all humanity, from wrath to redemption, from scattered exile to holy purpose. Through centuries of faith and failure, the tribe of Levi remained a living testimony that God can transform curse into calling, anger into devotion, bloodline into blessing. Their presence in every generation reminded Israel that holiness was not inherited by land or wealth, but by service and obedience. And though the temple would one day fall again, though priests would no longer offer lambs upon the altar, the spirit of Levi, that fierce, consuming passion for the presence of God, endured. It lived in the songs of the psalmists, in the teachings of the scribes, in the hearts of all who sought to serve with purity and zeal. Thus Levi, the son of Jacob and Leah, who once took the sword in vengeance, became the father of a tribe whose swords became instruments of worship. His descendants, once cursed to be scattered, were scattered indeed, as ministers of light across a darkened world. His name, meaning joined, was fulfilled in its truest sense, for through him, Israel was joined to its God. And so the legacy of Levi endures, in every song of devotion, in every act of service, in every heart that chooses holiness over wrath. From the tents of Jacob to the courts of Solomon, from exile to restoration, from wilderness to worship, the story of Levi is the story of transformation itself. A man once marked by anger became the symbol of consecration. A tribe once cursed became the heart of a nation's faith. And through them the world learned this eternal truth, that even wrath, when surrendered to God, can be reborn as worship.